My name is Margo Mosley, and I work here in Alexander County as an extension agent in Family and Consumer Sciences. And Family and Consumer Sciences across North Carolina is celebrating an important birthday this year. We're 100 years old. That means we started in the year 1911. But the name has changed. Back then we were called Home Demonstration. The name changed in the 70s to Home Economics and now Family and Consumer Sciences. But 100 years ago, in 1911, it was Home Demonstration. In 1911, Alexander County and the town of Taylorsville were already 64 years old. The population of the county was just under 12,000. In that year, Ronald Reagan was born. The first Indy 500 was run, and yet women didn't have the right to vote. History also records that in that year, a lady by the name of Jane McKimmon came to town, to Taylorsville from Raleigh, by train. During her visit, she met with farm women of the community in the unlikely meeting location of a boxcar. That meeting with Mrs. McKimmon was no ordinary meeting, but rather the beginning of what is now the Extension Family and Consumer Sciences program in Alexander County. Mrs. McKimmon taught the ladies certain homemaking skills, like how to make children's clothing, and she used demonstration methods. And so it began with a visit to Taylorsville from North Carolina's first home demonstration agent in 1911. In the early years of home demonstration, there were agents hired across North Carolina to work part-time, 2 to 3 months during the summer. The agent worked with girls starting tomato clubs. The girls learned to grow the tomatoes, learned how to can them, to provide food for the family, and how to sell the extra to provide money for other needs, like clothes and books. But the mothers wanted to be included too. So the home demonstration program for women began. Then in 1928, the Alexander County Commissioners felt that Alexander County was ready for their own full-time home demonstration agent. So money was set aside to hire Mrs. Marie Cox. It's said that Miss Cox traveled all up and down the country roads of rural Alexander County in her Chevrolet, toting her 3-burner oil stove. She had new ideas for the women to save work in the kitchen and to provide a more tasty meal. The women loved it, and so did their husbands. In that first year, 10 home demonstration clubs were formed, and women began meeting on a regular basis all year round. Local schoolhouses were often the meeting locations for home demonstration. One was the Reese Schoolhouse in the Ellendale community. Ellendale was one of the first home demonstration clubs organized. Later on, the Ellendale Club women built their own clubhouse, the first of its kind, and that's where they met for many years. Their meetings later moved to members' homes, but that clubhouse is still standing, which we know today as the Ellendale Community Building. Lisa, you're a familiar face and voice for Alexander County, connected to the whole community through Apple City Broadcasting.
Right, my voice more than anything.
Absolutely. But you have really strong connections to home demonstration, to that program.
I do.
Tell us something about that.
Well, my grandmother, Pearl McLean, was a member from 1938. She loved extension service. She loved the family consumer science aspect of it and taught me a lot of stuff. Taught all of our family, my mother, myself, and, you know, it's just been carried on.
Certainly, certainly. Can you remember any specific kinds of programs, topic areas that your grandmother was particularly fond of, or that were really passions for her, learned through home demonstration?
Canning.
Okay.
Canning and baking. That was 2 things that she really loved. And she took all the aspects as far as the economics of it, you know, for your family planning and planning meals, things like that.
Mm-hmm. What about sewing skills?
Well, she was a fabulous seamstress. She made a lot of my clothes and made all of her clothes, you know, a lot of her clothes and things like that. And she tried teaching me. When I got married, she made me a beautiful quilt when I got married, and it was gorgeous. And she tried real hard to teach me a lot of those skills, but some of it, I wasn't as good as she was.
Well, I think you're just too humble. We have here the quilt that you had a part in. This quilt was a joint effort of home demonstration, later called Extension Homemaker Clubs, about the year 1990, and the 6 clubs at that time each took a quilt block and designed a quilt block that represented their club, maybe the geographic area of the county, something about the industry there. And you had a part in making this quilt. Tell me something about this part that you did.
Well, they asked someone in the club to volunteer to do it, and I thought, oh, I'll do that. That was a little goofy because I wasn't that good at sewing. But I thought, well, I can put it together. And our club met at Rocky Springs Community Building. And behind it is the Rocky Face Mountain. So that's one of the things that I wanted to put into the quilt. And did it by just different, colors of fabric and sewing it on. Unlike a lot of the squares on this, mine was done pretty much by a sewing machine. I did hand paint the little cows on it. Did some painting of toil painting, that type of thing.
Well, and that's a great representation of your area. Plus, it has the hidden message of the importance of those creative skills that home demonstration has historically revered.
Absolutely. And we put the Hidden Eye Emerald in it. I had some input from the other ladies in the club what they'd like to see in it. And, of course, my mother helped me. My grandmother had already passed away, but she would have been fretting over it for sure because, she was a meticulous seamstress. Meticulous is not one of my words in my life.
I think she'd be proud.
During national events like World War I and World War II, American families were urged to produce and preserve their own food so that commercial products could be sent to people in Europe, to the soldiers fighting in the war. So folks in town became interested in growing gardens and canning their own food. Home demonstration work was the lead agency for teaching these skills. Many of the programs and services that we take for granted today were started by home demonstration in the early years, like curb markets, where women sold produce, meat, flowers, and baked goods. These markets at first were on the street or the courthouse lawns. Later, buildings to house the curb markets were built. So the farmers markets that are so popular today actually began years ago with the efforts by home demonstration members to add income for their farm families. Money from those curb markets sent their kids to college and allowed families to have money to improve their homes.
Mary, you've told me that you've been involved with home demonstration for many years, and that goes back to when your mother was involved with home demonstration. And I think you said something about curb markets were an important component of home demonstration work when your mother was involved. Tell me something about those curb markets, where they were.
The curb market was over at the Rock Stores, the community building, and the rock there is come from our Rocky Face. And my mother, the home extension club then, home demonstration club then, had tables, and they had, my mother sold butter, cottage cheese, eggs, and strawberries in season, and peaches, and sometimes she sold jelly when we had apples and different things, and anybody could go and sell that belonged to the home demonstration club, and that was a way of making a more of a better living.
Extra money. Excellent. Yes. Right. So you helped probably get things prepared to take to the market, and
I would carry a lot of the stuff in for my mother. And it had a table and it had a cloth on it, and it was real pretty. And they was the community building. There was lots of tables, and they had a variety of things.
Well, that's sort of the precursor of today's farmers markets that we enjoy now. So things that got their start years ago with an extension program, we see a renewed interest in today. And it's always been about those practical skills that have been learned through home demonstration, the cooking, the sewing. I think even I heard mattress making. Do you recall a time when they were involved with mattress making?
And my mother joined a home demonstration club in the late 20s, and she was still in it in the 30s. This was during World War II. I had 2 brothers in World War II, and I don't know whether she took schooling or just knew how to make mattresses, but she went up to the community building, and another lady from Stony Point, Ms. Zora Madison, and they made mattresses for people. You didn't have to belong to the club to get them. if your income was $400 to $600 a year, you could get a mattress, and it didn't cost you anything. Back then, during the war, you had feather beds and straw ticks to sleep on, and the mattresses were real nice, and the cotton was donated by the Agriculture Department in Raleigh. And I think they had a place up at Ellendale that someone made mattresses, but I enjoyed going with my mother, and she took our dinner every day we went, and we had dinner at dinner time, and I was just a child.
So she helped lead sort of classes so people could learn how to do that, and that was a part of her training through home demonstration.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, it's always been about those practical skills. The topics may have changed, but that's still a focus, helping families have a better living by doing things themselves.
Have a better way of life, I say.
Right. In the 1950s, home demonstration agents and the home demonstration clubs devoted a lot of time on projects for the community. For example, when the Good Health Council of the county identified the need for a hospital, home demonstration clubs organized to help furnish the waiting room. And it should be noted that one of those influential members of that council was the home demonstration agent. Agnes Watts was her name. Agnes Watts was the home demonstration agent in Alexander County for quite a number of years. In fact, her career spanned more years than any other agent before and since. Mrs. Watts was not only an agent, but she was a community leader, and she was seen in that role throughout that time too. I have with me Pantha Watts, her daughter, and she has certainly personal knowledge of all the things that were important to her mom during those years as the home demonstration agent. And so I'd like for her to talk about some of the things that she remembers of her mother and the things that were so very important and passionate to her.
Well, Mother was, she loved her job. She, if I could say she had a passion for it, she had a passion for people and education. She came into the county in 1937 and developed home demonstration clubs throughout the community. She also worked with 4-H clubs and did that work through the school system at that time. She, like I say, she was very interested in educating women. Women at that, in her early years of being a home economist, most women stayed at home. They didn't work outside the home, and so she was interested in teaching them how to can and to freeze. Worked with landscaping when they would be interested in building a home, with planning out the home and especially the kitchen. The kitchen was a very primary area, and so she loved working with house plans, and then later on then with the landscaping in the yard. She also taught women how to sew, and that was a very big role, because back during those times, starting in 1937, the economy was not good, and so we even remember taking feed sacks, and they would wash them a number of times and use those for aprons, skirts, dresses, whatever. So it was a time of economic unrest and uncertainty, and so it was very important to be as conservative with their food as well as with their expenses. She worked with finances with the families, working with them in developing budgets and how to plan out their financial situation for each family. So that was also a very important part. I want to say too that what she taught at home, in the clubs, she brought home, because we as her children were very involved in 4-H. she taught us how to sew. We did lots of canning and freezing and gardening. As time went on and women started to work, the situation with the demonstration clubs evolved, and women became more involved in the community and in the county and in projects related to the county. And so she saw that as just a very important role for women to come forward and step up as they entered the workforce and more community life.
Your mother was adamant about the need for rural women to develop leadership skills. In fact, she was a role model for that.
Yes, Mother served on the state and the national level. On the state level, she served as state treasurer, state vice president, and state president for the North Carolina Association of Home Economics Extension Agents. And also she was a chairperson for the housing committee for the state. And then on the national level, she was awarded the Distinguished Service Award for outstanding leadership and programming on the national level. And so that took place at their convention at the Fort Worth, Texas, on that. And she also was a chairperson for the recruiting committee on the national level for home economists. So she did a lot of work in a leadership role.
Certainly. Well, and she that model that she set as with her leadership certainly did impact rural women, her family, and the program that followed.
Right, I think it did. Mother thoroughly enjoyed working with the women and the young people of Alexander County for 33 years. So she was very passionate about educating women and young people. If it's okay, I'd like to quote something that Mother said about that.
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay. Mother said that one of the greatest accomplishments is that of leadership development among women. Women are taking a more active role in county and community affairs and in the business world. Aspirations for themselves and their families have been raised for the better things in life. She said that human talent is our greatest natural resource. Its conservation and development should be a primary concern for everyone. When human talent is wasted, everyone is deprived, and when it is rightly developed, everyone benefits. And that was a quote that she had that from years past. Also, during the years, I believe you told me 1948, they started thinking about the hospital and developing the hospital. And looking back through some of the papers, I noticed that she was involved in that, but also she got the ladies in the community and the extension clubs also involved in that. Right. And they actually did fundraising projects to try to raise money for the hospital. And then when the hospital was finished, they proceeded to landscape the hospital grounds. So that's another area where they worked. She also worked with the hospital administrator and with the Red Cross in training women how to be care providers in the home for the sick and the elderly. And she did a number of programs on that as well. So that was something else that was important to her.
Right. On a personal note, as we listen to the things that your mother did, her involvement in the community and with the programs that she directed, the bottom line is she was a working mom. And in those years, and she started in 1937, and her career spanned, I think, 30 plus years, that had to be tough because obviously you're one of the children and there were other children. Right. And so she was a working mom having to face things that were perhaps difficult, especially in those years?
Right. Well, Mother and Dad had four children, and the first three of us were born in fairly close, in the 4 years' time, three of us were born. And Mother actually, this is how things have evolved for women. During those times, she actually had to resign her position in order to have a child, to be off to have a child, and then was hired back each of the 3 times where there was 3 first. Wow. And then my little sister came along 9 years later, and that's the first time that they offered maternity leave, to where they actually allowed her to have time off to have a baby without having to resign. It was also during that time when they hired then the first assistant extension agent for the county during that time. So yes, things have changed a lot. I want to say too that even today, walking down the street or somewhere, if someone sees me, they will ask or remember, have a fond reflection on Mother and what influence she had in their lives. And today, as our economy has worsened once again, I think we're seeing more families go back to gardening and canning and freezing. So it's almost like it's come full circle again, that even though women are working, or even if they've lost their jobs, now they're coming back to a time whenever they can use those resources that they put aside years ago.
Right. And women like your mom are among that group. That the book that's been produced for our Centennial is titled Ordinary Women, Extraordinary Service. And I think she's a perfect reflection of that title.
Thank you.
The importance of leadership development for women and community service really gained momentum under the direction of Agnes Watts. And statewide home demonstration stressed that women should be involved not only in their communities and their state, but their nation and their world. The United Nations Study Tour is an example of that focus. This project made it possible for more than 1,500 North Carolina farm women to personally visit the United Nations in session. Here in Alexander County, at least 15 women were a part of that effort during the 50s and the 60s. Lisa, leadership development and recognition for service in home demonstration has always been really important. And your grandmother, Pearl McLean, was the first Alexander County member to receive the state's highest leadership award. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I know she got a really killer silver tray, and she treasured this tray. She got it in 1959, and that was I was born in 65, so it was several years before I was born, and I knew that she had done a lot of service work, community work, and home extension work to receive this award.
Right. And the award itself is a silver tray from A&P, the grocers, and they for years sponsored that award. So that silver tray is a lovely recognition of that service for her, and we're very proud of that. There's only been a couple of members since then. One of the most recent is Ella Mae Nichols, a few years back, received that award, but your grandmother was the first.
And I have a picture of Ella Mae, and we'll show that in a few minutes, but Nanny, when they both got the award, and my grandmother was also a lifetime member.
Yes, she was. That was another way that her club recognized what an important role she had played with club members, as well as within the community and at the county level. So that lifetime membership was bestowed on her as well.
She loved Extension Homemakers. She loved the meetings, going to the meetings, and the other ladies. They were all just warm and inviting, and they went to people's homes a lot of times.
Right.
And that was one of the things I loved when they were coming to the house, especially during holidays, and preparing the food and cleaning the house and getting it ready. And she spent a lot of time working on the devotions that she would give that night and certain points that were really important to her.
And I think from the things you've said, it really impacted the whole family. Your daughter Mindy, for example, never knew her great-grandmother.
No.
And yet, from what you've told me, Mindy has been influenced by her great-grandmother.
Well, apparently, because she teaches family consumer science at South Iredell High School. But she went to Appalachian State, and she was influenced by a teacher here at the high school. And she took the classes and just seemed to love it. And she loves teaching it. The same thing that I think my grandmother liked doing, my mother liked doing, and I enjoy doing, is showing people, you know, the canning, the cooking, and teaching how to make really good peanut butter cookies, things like that.
What a legacy your grandmother created.
Absolutely.
Club women have also given financially to projects beyond the community. In the 1950s, members all across the state donated extra dues for several years as a building fund. Then in 1966, they presented a check for $100,000 to the North Carolina legislature to be used as seed money for NC State to build what is now the McKimmon Center for Continuing Education, which sits on the edge of the NC State campus. That name selected, of course, to honor that first home demonstration agent, Jane McKimmon. The name Home Demonstration changed in the late 70s to Home Economics, and clubs became Extension Homemaker Clubs. But developing leadership skills continued to be an important part of their mission. And those leadership skills can have an impact even on the local economy. Virginia, you've been coming to the Apple Festival a long time, 22 years. What got you started?
Well, actually, the Sugarloaf Community Development and the Sugarloaf Extension Homemakers got together, and Louise Adams and I got the idea that we needed an apple festival in Alexander County, and so we started it as a group, and Louise and I were co-chairmen. And so we have worked at it for years, and then that's how it started and how we got started.
Well, what was it like the very first year then? It sounds like it was a team effort. What was the first year like?
A lot of hard work, very hard work. We had it, the first one at the Taylorsville Elementary baseball field because they wouldn't let us have it uptown. They said it could not be done, and we just said, just hide and watch because we're going to have a festival. And so we started it out there. We had one apple grower, Perry Lowe and Sons, and we had, I think, about 50 vendors, and had a really good turnout. Cold as blue blazes. It was in November that we started the first one, and the wind blew really hard, and it was very, very cold. But we got through it, and after we got through that one, the town said, "We want you uptown." So we came uptown with it.
Well, you had a vision. You, 22 years ago, had been thinking that such a festival might work here, but what planted that idea for your club to do such a thing?
Well, we knew that the Wilkes County had the Brushy Mountain Apple Festival. I was on the first committee for that one, and it went over really, really big. And my dad was an apple grower, and I knew a lot of apple growers, and Taylorsville used to be Apple City, and we wanted to be Apple City again. So the first Apple Festival was Apple City Apple Festival. And then we gave the festival to the Hometown Development Council, and they changed it to the Hometown Taylorsville Apple Festival. So it was originally meant to be Apple City, to bring Apple City back to Taylorsville, because it was even on the class rings years ago. And they had everything was Apple City at that time. So we wanted it, Taylorsville recognized as Apple City again. And we wanted a festival that everybody could be proud of.
Well, Virginia, your vision has certainly meant a lot to this community. In fact, the Apple Festival today, now in its 22nd year, this is the largest economic development activity for this whole county. So it started with your vision and the work of a committee of Extension homemaker members and community development members to make that first start a success and grow from there. So we appreciate that vision that you had. It's like that ordinary women with extraordinary service. We appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, and you know you can do anything if you try. I didn't ever do anything. That was taught to me very early in life.
Exactly.
So you have to try if you get anything done, and that's what we did.
Home demonstration members were green long before the term became so popular. During World War II, the home demonstration program promoted scrap collection to help the war effort. Members saved scrap metal, nylon hose, even fat and grease. Aluminum collection drives have continued over the years, making recycling an ongoing household practice that's just part of being a good citizen. Area meetings continue to provide demonstrations about healthy eating, saving money, heritage skills, and home safety. Community service projects promote literacy, food banks, and bike safety education. They help local groups like 4-H, Crisis Pregnancy Center, Samaritan's Purse, and Hospice. Members are recognized for their work too, through county and state awards programs. Family and consumer sciences programs developed here in North Carolina and used locally in Alexander County are some of the best in the country. The Color Me Healthy program has reached over 1,000 children locally and 75,000 in the state. The Juntos program provides information for Latino parents and youth to encourage their success in school, prevent dropout, and to encourage families to work together to gain access to college. Partners in Wellness is a nutrition program that targets older adults at congregate nutrition sites. The program's checkbook for listing medications has become quite a beneficial tool and has actually saved several lives. The Serve Safe program, taught in several languages, teaches food safety practices to food service workers in schools and restaurants. The Real Money, Real World program helps middle school students understand just how much the necessities like food and housing really cost, and just how important school success is for future job success. Eat Smart, Move More, Weigh Less classes have helped hundreds of folks with weight loss, not only learning how to eat less, but eat healthy and keep moving. Home canning has seen renewed interest. More folks are growing their own food and preserving it by freezing or canning. Family and Consumer Sciences is still the go-to source for information about safe methods. Canning clinics each year remind folks about the need to use safe equipment and follow recommended practices, and demonstration remains the most effective way to learn those skills. Too many meals eaten away from home are partly responsible for the increase in health problems like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Cook Smart, Eat Smart classes have helped introduce simple cooking methods and quick recipes that taste good for today's busy families. Annual cooking schools for kids teach basic cooking skills to the next generation, like how to measure ingredients and how to follow a recipe, the importance of keeping the kitchen clean, and even how to set the table.
One of the exciting products of this Centennial celebration is a coffee table history book that highlights accomplishments of the program since it began 100 years ago. The title is Ordinary Women, Extraordinary Service, and it's a tribute to the spirit and dedication of ordinary women, both professionals and volunteers, past and present, who have given extraordinary service to their communities and to North Carolina. Copies of this book have been placed around the county in both libraries and other locations, and copies are available for purchase at the Cooperative Extension Center. Jane McKimmon had a vision of an educational program that could literally change people's lives, and that program is doing the same thing today. We don't meet in a boxcar anymore, and our demonstrations aren't about making mattresses. But our priority is still about serving you, our local families in Alexander County, by bringing the resources of the university back into the community. You have the will, we have the way.